Good morning, students. We've been looking at the Bhakti and Sufi traditions and its birth, and we also saw, and through this chapter, that for hundreds and thousands of years, the Indian system of faith, that is the religious system, had been going on a particular mode and on its where the Brahmins dominated whatever was the discourse within the society. Now that started changing in the 11th and the 10th century when the foreign invaders who practiced Islam started entering India, and now we would be looking at the impact it had. But before we get into it, if you remember, we discussed yesterday that how these rulers were different was the fact that Islam, when it spread to different parts of West Asia and in Africa, the whole population used to get converted into that particular faith, that of Islam. They used to abandon their old religious beliefs and they would convert to Islam. But it did not happen in India because, for one very important reason, that the rulers who ruled India, definitely they were foreigners, but then they were not interested as much as that they should completely change the faith of Indians from whatever they were practicing. Yes, they were Muslims. Yes, they had preference for Islam, but they did not consider themselves only as the rulers of Muslim. They thought that yes, they were the rulers of this whole nation called Hind or Hindustan, whatever might be the faith of people that they might be practicing, whether Hinduism or Christianity or whatever it was. Definitely remember there was no Sikhism at that point in time. And this is what also gets reflected from this paragraph. A church in Kambat, guys, you should know that Kambat is in, yes, it's in Gujarat. Okay, it's a coastal town. Kambat, it's a coastal town, and it is currently part of the city of Anand. Okay. Uh, and this is an excerpt from Farman, that is imperial order issued by Akbar in 1598. Whereas it reached our eminent and holy notice that the Padris, that is, fathers of the Holy Society of Jesus, wish to build a house of prayer, church in the city of Kambat in Gujarat. Therefore, an exalted mandate is being issued that the dignitaries of the city of Kambat should in no case stand in their way, but should allow them to build a church so that they may engage themselves in their own worship. It is necessary that the order of the emperor should be obeyed in every way. Uh, so that gives you an idea about when the Christian missionaries wanted to construct a church in Gujarat. Akbar clearly gave orders that yes, they should be allowed to build their churches, and no one from the administration, the local administration, should interfere in their in the construction of that church. Okay. The popular practice of Islam. The developments that followed the coming of Islam were not confined to ruling elites. In fact, they permeated far and wide through the subcontinent among different social strata, peasants, artisans, warriors, merchants, to name a few. All those who adopted Islam accepted in principle the five pillars of the faith, that there is one God, Allah, and Prophet Muhammad is his messenger, offering prayers 5 times a day, giving alms, that is zakat, fasting during the month of Ramzan, and performing the pilgrimage to Mecca, that is Hajj. However, these universal features were often overlaid with diversities in practice derived from sectarian affiliations, that is Shia and Sunni, and the influence of local customary practices of converts from different social milieus. For example, the Khojas, a branch of the Ismailis, a Shia sect, developed new modes of communication, disseminating ideas derived from the Quran through indigenous literary genres. Guys, Khojas, a branch of the Ismailis. You have to understand, if you have ever heard of Aga Khan. Aga Khan happens to be the spiritual leaders of the Ismailis. Okay. Now, these included Gyanan, derived from the Sanskrit Gyan, meaning knowledge, as we all know. Uh, Devotional poems in Punjabi, Multani, Sindhi, Kutchi, Hindi, and Gujarati sung in special rags during daily prayer meetings. Elsewhere, Arab Muslim traders also settled along the Malabar coast, that is Kerala, adopted this local language Malayalam. They also adopted local customs such as matrilineal and matriarchal residence. That is essentially meaning that the man stays in the family with the family of his wife. Okay, unlike the custom which was there and which still is in the rest of the country, where the woman comes to stay with her husband and his family. But Kerala had always been where the husband would stay with the woman's family. Okay, and the Muslims, the new converted Muslims, also started practicing this faith and this custom. The complex blend of universal faith with local tradition is perhaps best exemplified in the architecture of mosques. Some architectural features of mosques are universal, such as their orientation towards Mecca, evident in the placement of the mihrab, that is, and the minbar. However, there are several features that show variations, such as roofs and building materials. Strengths, this is obvious. If you go to, there are a lot of mosques, even in Southeast Asian countries, that is, in the areas, countries like China or Korea or Japan or Cambodia, Vietnam, all these countries also have mosques, but their architecture is absolutely unique because they have their own different varieties and kinds of the typical which you see the Southeast Asian countries, the different architecture that they have, whether even in Thailand and Burma, for that, for and Malaysia for that matter, compared to what you see in India, and again, and very interestingly, students, if you go to North Africa, their mosques have a slightly different kind of an architecture. They do not follow the Arabic architecture, which is followed in India and Pakistan and even in Bangladesh for that matter. But in North Africa, it is entirely a different kind of architecture that they follow. And similarly, when you look at Southeast Asia, they follow they of course those buildings are mosques, but they would not look like a mosque to an Indian eye. Names for communities. We often take the terms Hindu and Muslim for granted as labels for religious communities. Religious communities. Yet these terms did not gain currency for a very long time. Historians who have studied Sanskrit texts and inscriptions dating between the 8th and 14th centuries point out that the term Musulman or Muslim was virtually never used. Instead, people were occasionally identified in terms of the region from where they came. So the Turkish rulers were designated as um, Turksha, Tajika were known from Tajikistan, and Parashika were from Persia. Persia, that is Iran, that is modern Iran. Sometimes terms used for other people were applied to new migrants. For instance, the Turks and the Afghans were referred to as Shaka and Yavanas. Yavanas, that is the Greeks. Uh, a more general term for these migrant communities was Malicha, indicating that they did not observe the norms of caste society and spoke languages that was not derived from Sanskrit. Such terms sometimes had a derogatory connotation, but they rarely denoted a distinct religious community of Muslims in opposition to Hindus. So it was more a reflection of the fact that they had their own uniqueness, because of which they were termed as Malichas. And not that they were considered as inferior to them, just that they had their own unique ways to everything. Their food habits were different, their culture was different, everything was unique about them. Their approach to things were different. So naturally, they were just to mark as a distinction, they were branded in such a fashion that they were Malichas, because foreigners, who would have the unique set of customs and ways of doing things. Okay, it was nothing derogatory that they were being considered inferior. Thank you.